Warning, censorship. Warning, censorship. Warning, censorship.
What do you think about the fact that Zach has decided to defy the city and open his gym? The city doesn't want that to happen, but clearly you're still coming here to work out, so I guess it would appear that you're fine with that decision.
Well, of course. I've been a fitness guru the last 10 years or so, and since in March, when the pandemic started, it's even more important to be active during these stressful times. And the last 25 days, when the city closed, not the city, but the province closed the gym and the dining room experience, I just find it wasn't right, especially without any proven data that fitness is a deterrent to or it's not a deterrent to the virus. So yes, I got to support my good buddy Zach, who stood out here to make a point and to say to everyone, well, fitness is important, and going to the gym every day, it's part of the getting around to this crazy virus.
David Menzies for Rebel News here in Orleans, Ontario. And folks, I'm with Zach Boissinot. He is the owner of A Foot Above Fitness. It is a personal training gym. And Mr. Boissinot opened his doors about 2 years ago. Everything was just humming along fine. And then, of course, like the rest of the world, the Wuhan virus struck. And that really threw a crowbar into Mr. Boissinot's operation. However, Zach, while the city and the region was in lockdown mode, decided that, well, enough is enough, and he decided to reopen. And wouldn't you know it, that brought a whole heap of trouble to him. So, Zach, as I mentioned, a couple of years ago, you opened your gym. Everything's going along very smooth. It's a fantastic gym. You gave us a brief tour. You've got members who are very happy. And then along comes the lockdown. First of all, how was the lockdown hurting your business?
Well, so like the lockdown originally, I'm going to say March and April, and when things were worst, I didn't really know what was going on. I didn't know in terms of the virus. We were all kind of figuring out what was going on. And so I truthfully locked down. I stopped business for that little bit of period of time, started to read, started to understand there was more to it. That was horrible on business. Thankfully, I had a really good landlord here. They were nice in terms of my rent. They helped me out along the way. But still an absolute all stop to all the trainers and all their business that was going on in here. I started to do a little bit more reading. I realized that I fell a little bit closer to a personal service than I did a gym by their definition. And so I believed I should be open. And so we opened back up. And then it took about 2 weeks before bylaws showed up and told me I was not exempt. They issued fines and started guns a-blazing.
This is interesting. So obviously the city and bylaw, they didn't buy your explanation that you're in, I guess, the personal services business as opposed to a de rigueur gymnasium. And what was the nuance there? Why were you convinced you were in the right, and what made them think that you were in the wrong?
Well, so in the research that I had done, as the North American Industry Classification System states, personal training falls under personal services, like a hair salon or hairdresser or something like that. Those are the services that we offer here. Yes, we let our members come in and use the facility if they have training, but I don't sell just a membership. My master business license says personal training for A Foot Above Fitness. It does not say a gym. And that was kind of one of the things was talking to the bylaws. They said, oh, we looked into your business licensing and you're licensed as a gym. And the words quite clearly was like, you're not exempt, you're not exempt. And he kind of just kept repeating that much as I tried to explain my situation. I now have all those documents up at the front of the space here, and I have that all ready for anybody who needs to see it. But in my mind, it was quite clear that I should have fallen in between those goalposts, but they were not hearing it at all.
So, Zach, you ran into a brick wall in terms of reasoning with them, in terms of trying to get them to come around to your side of how you saw the situation. What did they end up fining you for, or what was the total dollar amount of those fines?
Okay, so there was 3 fines in total. 2 of them were for $490. There was one that was for not having proper signage on my front doors. There was one that was for not reminding my patrons to put masks on. Even though they hadn't been around me, they didn't hear any of my interactions with any of my patrons or anybody in here. And then the third one was being open as per section 7.0.2 of the modified phase 2 or whatever it was.
You know, the
That was for $880, sorry.
880, and I mean the first two. I mean, that almost sounds a little petty to me. I mean, not having the proper signage on your door, that could be taken care of in 10 seconds. As you said, they weren't even around to witness, you having interaction with clients about the mask. So it almost seems a little vindictive in terms of how they were hammering you. I mean, surely wasn't the 880 enough?
Well, I mean, it certainly did feel like that. They came back the day after and started to try and issue fines again. They gave one of my trainers a fine for not wearing a mask without asking whether he had an exemption or looking into that at all either. I had heard later on from one of our clients who was close to a bylaws officer that we'd gotten a whole bunch of calls saying that, oh, they're a gym and they're open. The bylaws told me that they only show up once they've received enough complaints to do so, and that's why they showed up. I was also told that the bylaws were supposed to issue a warning first, but they seemed to come out a little bit guns blazing. I did my best to kind of talk to them, but there was only so much to be said. They didn't want to hear what I had to say.
Do you buy into this, that this is a further, penalty on those people that just need a physical outlet, essentially to work out the stress they're under?
Well, I think we look at this as like a respiratory illness, and it's a virus that attacks your lungs. And okay, sure, that's one body part, but let's not forget about the body part that sits in between your ears. And I think taking care of your brain, like you said, like healthy mind, healthy body, those go hand in hand together. And to have people then locked down, not go outside, don't get your vitamin D, there's a whole bunch of supporting evidence that a lot of that stuff is really good for symptoms of this COVID virus. And so for the government to try and just shut it all down, and it felt very blanket statement, especially given that the numbers just weren't terrifying like they were back in March. And so that was one of the legs I stood on in terms of opening back up. And then I think that the billions that we have spent in giving, I say hand-me-outs to businesses or the CERB or whatever you want to call it, had we taken a fraction of that and put it into our nursing homes, I should say, let's be correct, and long-term care, then that type of stuff, we could have saved literally billions of dollars and fixed a problem that I think we all kind of knew existed prior to all this. We'd all heard horror stories about a bad nursing home or mistreatment of clients, and that was kind of in our back of our minds, and it's been put to the front now. And I still don't think I've heard much been fixed in terms of what's going on for those places. And so, no, I think that our allocation of wealth in terms of dealing with this has not been proportionate to where the allocation of cases and certainly not deaths are.
And certainly, too, another important factor, I think, Zach, is that our political leaders, including Doug Ford, who ran on the 2018 platform of For the People and Ontario Open for Business, he has repeatedly said, as has others of every political stripe and every level of office, that we want the economy to open, but we have to take the advice of doctors. We have to take the advice of scientists. And yet, just less than 2 weeks ago, I believe, even the World Health Organization said that locking down the economy is not recommended as a cure-all for this virus. So if the WHO is actually saying this is wrong, who are our leaders and who are our bureaucrats getting their advice from?
Well, your guess is as good as mine on that one. I think I've personally had doctors reach out to me and start to give me evidence against some of the cases that they're doing. Yes, there was a Great Barrington Declaration that was around for a little bit as well. There was a whole bunch of doctors who had signed that as well. I think that there has been a huge outcry from the PhD community against some of these measures, and I think that it's silly for us to look at just the government-appointed ones for information and put all of our faith in them. I know I saw at least a couple other doctors who said something to the effect that some of the doctors that we're referring to in government now haven't been on the front lines for a very long time. Cameron Love of the Ottawa Hospital said that their situation is not bad. They're not overrun. We're not swamped with ICU and people on ventilators and all of that stuff. And so I think that the government seems to put too much emphasis on the advice of a handful rather than looking at the advice of many, I guess.
Indeed, I truly believe the cure has been worse than the curse. But here's the deal. You, like so many thousands of entrepreneurs right across Canada, Zach, you were at the brink. You were closed down. You weren't earning money. In your case, you even felt that you had a valid exemption to open under the personal services mechanism. Clearly, the city does not agree. The thing is that you took a stand and said, I am opening anyways. You got slapped with more than $1,900 worth of fines. We don't think that's right. And in addition to telling your story, Zach, you are our first client in our new website portal called iwillopen.com. Folks, you know my colleague Avi Yamini down under, he has done his version of I Will Open. I think he's up to 4 or 5 clients. It began with a menswear shop, then a hair salon, then a couple of restaurants. We are paying every penny of their legal fees to fight those fines in Australia. And Zach, as you know, we've reached out to you. We put you in touch with an excellent lawyer here in the Ottawa area, David Enber. He is going to fight your fines. You've got enough stress on your hands trying to make ends meet. And we are going to crowdfund all of your legal fees so that we can bring you and your gym here justice. What do you think about that?
I'm at a loss for words when I heard that from you. I've had an outpouring of people who've been trying to support me, and it's felt like there's a whole bunch of people behind me, but to have something as generous as we're going to take care of legal fees, that is a huge gesture, and I am incredibly thankful for it. Like you said, I feel like I had kind of opened up and was, I say, fighting this alone. Obviously not alone. I've got lots of support to it, but it feels certainly like the team that's behind me is starting to grow, especially with you guys. It's been, I couldn't say thank you enough.
Well, I really appreciate that, Zach. And you're a young guy, you're a young entrepreneur. You just want to make a living, an honest living. You just want to give your members an opportunity to better themselves physically and mentally. I don't see what the crime is here, and and you can bet whenever your case gets to a court of law, we will indeed be covering that. I think you're on the right side of this equation.
Good. I'm looking forward to having you guys there the whole way through. Let's do this.
Well, I'm with Ottawa criminal lawyer David Enber, and David, you have taken on Zach as a client. And I want to, it's a heartbreaking story. Here's a guy just trying to make a living with his boutique personal training facility. His back is up against the wall. He feels he has to open almost as an act of civil disobedience just in order to, A, make a living, and B, provide the services his clients so desperately need. What was it about his case that attracted you to it?
Well, here in the city of Ottawa, David, we've been now, on 6 or 7 months of flattening the curve. And I know that the city of Ottawa has been, on one hand, vigilant in terms of trying to enforce some of these new regulations. But on another hand, in many situations, they've been overzealous in terms of their enforcement and in terms of whether or not they're even giving effect to any exemptions that exist. And there's questions as to whether or not that we really need these laws anymore at this point in time.
Yeah, and when it comes to being overzealous, David, more than $1,900 worth of fines without any kind of communication, a warning. One was for just not having the right signage on his front door. Do you see this as Ottawa bylaw being especially heavy-handed on Zach?
Well, it is heavy-handed, and it's, again, coming from the top. When you look at the number of cases of COVID in Ottawa, David, there's, I think, 0.6 or 0.7 of 1/10 of 1% of the population of the entire city has COVID, most of whom are showing symptoms and so aren't out and about. And so for that very small risk of the transmission of COVID, there are these fairly draconian provisions that are in place that are shutting down businesses, preventing people from going about their livelihoods, preventing citizens from having a sense of normalcy in their lives. And bylaw is imposing these very hefty fines on them.
And David, I understand you don't want to, show your cards before you get into a court of law in terms of what your legalistic strategy is going to be. But I would imagine, when we've reached out to other lawyers and where we're fighting the fines for individual citizens, basically the theme has been that even under an Emergency Services Act mandate, that still doesn't give the government the power to trump the Constitution, to trump our charter rights. Is that kind of the direction you'd be going in when you argue this in a court of law?
Well, I'll say this, David. Again, I haven't seen the file or the disclosure, but I will say that everything is on the table when it comes to fighting these types of cases, and in Zach's case in particular, we're going to look at the constitutionality of the enactment. We're also going to look at something like if the enactment was even in effect. I know that in the city of Ottawa, it came to an end at the end of October, and we have to see if it was renewed in the appropriate manner. We have to also look to see if Zach qualified for any exemptions as well. So these are all things that we're going to be looking at to see if the charges have been proven or could be proven, and we'll go from there.
And folks, this is the thing. We're not just telling the stories of people that are getting screwed by the system during this Wuhan virus pandemic. We're trying to make a difference. IWillOpen.com is the website. I can tell you these legal fees, these lawyers, it does not come cheap. We depend on your generosity as always. I know this is a terrible time to reach out and ask for crowdfunding, but we must, so people like Zach get a modicum of justice their way. So if you can make a donation, please go to IWillOpen.com. And if there are any other entrepreneurs like Zach that feel that, hey, I've got nothing to lose, my back is against the law, I have to do some civil disobedience to put bread on the table. If you want to open, we want to tell your story. So once again, IWillOpen.com. For Rebel News here in Orleans, Ontario, I'm David the Menzoid Menzies. Folks, have you had enough of the lockdown restrictions? Well, if you're considering opening your business in defiance of the state, I want to hear your story. Let me know by going to IWillOpen.com.